Introducing the American way of life on the threshold of the golden 60s. Color, style, comfort, utility, and convenience. Recreation, fun. These are the ultimate desires of today, tomorrow, and the years ahead of us.
America went into the 1960s as a great and secure nation, reasonably certain, despite the paranoia of the Cold War, that its culture and its political framework were the envy of the world. Its wealth was immense, its destiny virtuous, and even its internal problems of inequality and racism could soon be fixed by good men writing new laws. Nothing could resist American know-how and American can-do. This was, as the phrase went, the new frontier upon which a great society would grow.
I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
But then, this world of promise began to unravel.
Big strong man, Uncle Sam, to help again. Got himself in a terrible jam. Way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books and pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam.
America's troubles lay in a tiny, remote Asian country called Vietnam, a former colony of France in which Americans had never had the smallest strategic, economic, or cultural interest. In 1965, 9 out of 10 Americans couldn't have spelt its name or found it on a map. By 1968, Vietnam was a national obsession and had split the country apart in the most divisive and culturally ruinous conflict since the Civil War a century earlier. The consensus that had held America together for 100 years was shattered, and the results are still with us today, in mistrust of government, in the collapse of the Great Society programs, in the so-called culture wars, and in America's disillusionment with its power to fulfill its own idealist promises. The cowboys were no longer the good guys. The Indians were no longer the savages. The nightmare of Vietnam cast America into an age of anxiety from which it has not yet emerged. And did some of its art reflect this? How could it not? In 1968, Ed Kienholz finished his portable war memorial. On the left, the patriotic singer Kate Smith, a trash can on legs, continuously emits the unofficial national anthem, Irving Berlin's God Bless America. Next to her, a parody of the Iwo Jima monument in Arlington National Cemetery, the Second World War GIs hoisting the flag. But in Kienholz's version, they're faceless, and they're planting the symbol of victory on a delicatessen table. Behind them, the famous World War I recruiting poster, Montgomery Flags, Uncle Sam. But in the right half, a couple eat their hot dogs at a fast food counter beside a Coke machine. Their dogs are killer, but they don't even notice the GIs. Kienholz is saying that America is so tied into a war mentality, a defense economy, that it seems quite ordinary by 1968, the 20th year of the Cold War with Vietnam raging. It's just business as usual, taken for granted.
I have a reputation mostly for controversial art. Critics, for instance, have a lot of trouble putting in context and naming. It's hard for the average writer to put me in a convenient box that defines me.
People often tried to put Kienholz together with the American pop artists, but his work had an angry earnestness that throughout everything pop art saw as benign in mass culture. Did he exaggerate? Yes, but that's what large-hearted moralists do. They don't want their art to be fair. Some truths only speak from the well of exaggeration. Kienholz once worked in a California madhouse, and when you look through the barred door of his tableau, The State Hospital, you see a charnel house of the soul, where the locked-up patient on the lower bunk can only dream of the identical misery of the patient above. Until his death in 1994, Ed Kienholz worked in partnership with his wife, Nancy Reddin Kienholz. Between them, they made objects that ranged across the whole canon of American public imagery, turning it upside down to find the anxieties below. In Shine on Shine, their version of Chester Daniel French's monument to Abraham Lincoln, the great emancipator, the throne becomes a shoeshine chair, and his shoes are still, a century later, being buffed by a pair of black hands. For 30 years, Ed Kienholz defined a whole side of American culture, and he left instructions to make his own funeral into his last tableau. He was buried on top of a mountain in Idaho in a big old Packard which Nancy steered into the grave like an Egyptian funeral barge. In his pocket was a deck of cards, and on the seat beside him was a bottle of 1931 Chianti. He was set for the afterlife. I got to America in 1970, and I stayed because I had a job. I was going to be the art critic of Time magazine. I wasn't exactly a boy from the bush then, but you didn't need to be one to feel scared and excited at the idea of living in Manhattan. Crossing the East River was like crossing the Rubicon. No way back. Today, New York is still a world cultural capital, but it's not the imperial center. No place is. But in 1970 it was, and its house style, so to speak, was minimalism, the last of the big isms of American art. Marfa, Texas, 200 miles south of El Paso, population 2,500, main industry, cattle ranching. Marfa is about as far from the New York art world as you can get, except that the doyen of American minimalism, Donald Judd, came here to work in 1972. This is the place to see his output. The works are housed in some 40 restored buildings, like these artillery sheds left over from the Second World War, which contain 100 gleaming aluminium boxes, their silver surfaces reflecting one another, the big sky and the flat landscape outside. It's a temple of aesthetic fanaticism.
Minimal art completely rejected imagery. It avoided nature, although sometimes it could play very well against a landscape. Its materials were inorganic: steel, concrete, plastic, polished metal. It was impersonal, machined and assembled, not hand-wrought. It denied the human body. It denied touch. It existed for the eye alone. And yet its denial of the sensuous was deeply American. You thought of the purity of Shaker furniture, of the spareness of Puritan meeting houses, boxes with God's word in them.
Judd's work was hard to like because the purity he sought was of a kind that most people don't want in sculpture. No figure, no parts, no relationships, no movement, no metaphors, no secrets. Just the thing in itself, and a completely inexpressive thing at that. None of which excluded the fact that it could be beautiful in an anxious utopian way. It's in the world, but it tells us nothing about the world. Everyone respected Judd's Puritanism, but they didn't want to be so exclusive about it. And yet, they too could be just as extreme. One such artist was Richard Serra, who wanted to find a way past the purity of minimalism by invoking the human body and its anxieties in weight, mass, and hard work with heavy materials.
I thought that with my own hands that I could involve myself in a process of making that could confront minimalism and open up the field. And so basically I started very simply writing down a verb list and enacting physical processes in relation to the material I had at hand. To split, to cut, to sever, to drop, to remove, to simplify, to differ, to disarrange, to open, to mix, to splash, to knot, to spill, to droop, to flow.
High minimalism could be ordered from a factory by phone, not Serra's. He was a manual worker, intimately involved with the process of making and the logic of materials. He lifted sheets of rubber. He dumped arrays of metal on the floor. He spattered molten lead into corners.
In the late 60s, you were throwing molten lead into a corner. I would have thought clearly the act of throwing liquid metal has some relation to Pollock's throwing of skeins of liquid paint on a canvas. Pollock was very important to you, wasn't he?
It's very important in terms of the process and the final product being one and the same. And I think that for me broke more ground than the minimalist had. Basically what I was trying to do was use the juncture of the wall and the floor, the architectural device, to make a sculpture. And then I would do that, and then I would uncrank it, turn it over, and pull it back. The fact that it was done by flinging the lead stylistically looks like Pollock, but when I was building those pieces, I certainly didn't have Pollock in mind.
What he did have in mind was the weight of sculpture, its presence in the world, something to set against the abstraction of ideas.
I'm excited right now.
Richard Serra's massive sculptures are anxious monuments. You skirt them with respect. Nothing except gravity holds the tons of steel plate together. No welds, no bolts, no brackets. If it fell on you, it would squash you like a bug. In the 1970s, the ambitions of American artists were large, and space in Soho, in downtown New York, was cheap. The two came together when the sculptor Walter de Maria got the Deer Center for the Arts to buy a second-floor loft on Worcester Street. One of the hopes of minimalists and conceptual artists was to make works of art that would somehow transcend the art market, while demanding more and more space from museums and galleries. Here, de Maria did both. He turned the loft into a low-key pilgrimage centre by filling it with 125 tons of deep, rich, chocolate-coloured soil, covering 3,600 square feet of prime real estate in perpetuity to a depth of 22 inches. A gallery full of earth. In the 1970s, some artists wanted to inscribe their designs on the earth itself. A classic of land art was created by Robert Smithson on the edge of the Great Salt Lake in Utah in 1970. He moved 10,000 tons of rock, dumping it into the red water to make what he called the spiral jetty. He meant his jetty as a tribute to prehistoric works of earth art. From the air, it resembled a spiral nebula in outer space. Smithson knew it would sink back into the lake. He was fascinated by entropy, the way that systems run down and fall apart. If the land could be the surface of art, so could the body. In his film piece Art Makeup, Bruce Nauman smeared himself with paint, but not for pleasure. Pleasure is Nauman's enemy.
In terms of his effects on younger artists over the last 15 or 20 years, Bruce Nauman has some claim to be called the most influential artist in America, even though you seldom get anybody claiming to actually enjoy his work. It explores whatever could turn you off: aggro, torpor, bad jokes, paranoia, and boredom, especially boredom. The artist as hero may have vanished from American life, but Nauman has carved himself out a different kind of niche: the artist as nuisance.
This piece, Carousel, is grossly disagreeable. It gives you a glimpse of hell with molds of deer and wolves, the plastic molds used by taxidermists, going slowly round to the amplified scraping noise they make while dragging on the floor.
I'll talk. They'll listen.
I'll talk.
They'll
They'll listen.
I'll listen.
You'll talk. They'll listen.
In a recent video piece, Nauman explores the way we communicate with each other, or don't.
I'll talk to you. They'll listen to me.
And now take two.
You talk to me.
You'll talk to them. They'll listen to you.
Nauman is something of an old-fashioned moralist, and this comes out in a certain bossiness. His work sends messages about behaviour and how it's controlled by others. It can get quite sinister.
Put your hands in your lap, your hat on your head. Sit on your hat, your hands on your head.
The image of a mime obeys the orders of a calm, disembodied voice, the outer parent. The orders get more and more confusing, more and more humiliating.
Sit in your hat. Show me your hat. Put your hat on your head.
Do you feel the anxiety in your work mirrors a more general kind of anxiety in America itself?
Probably. I know that Ed Kienholz once said to me, don't you think it's just a great time to be an artist because you can just do anything and people will accept it? And I think that kind of open possibility, it's confusing because you don't know exactly what you're supposed to do then. And I think the whole culture's become a little open like that, and so people are very anxious because they don't know what the rules are anymore.
But as body art, video, conceptual art and process took over the 70s, what had become of abstract painting, once the glory of the New York school? Great claims had been made for colour field painting as the inevitable successor to abstract expressionism, the sole bearer of high seriousness. Huge lyrical canvases, stains and soaks of transparent colour by artists like Helen Frankenthaler. These watercolours writ large were often very beautiful when they weren't just being intelligently pretty. They offered nothing but disinterested pleasure, and they became, for a time, the official art, the salon art of America. But to me, the best abstract painter of the time wasn't in New York at all. His name was Richard Diebenkorn, and he lived and worked in Ocean Park, a beachside suburb of Los Angeles. Preserving the highlight and the diagonal cuts and the tonal balance, Diebenkorn's work moved towards the grandly ordered images of coast, sea and sky in his Ocean Park paintings, abstractions which don't reject the world but contain it in a concentrated form. Richard Diebenkorn was a mediator between abstraction and natural vision. He painted some of the most intelligent responses to Matisse that any American had done. Blue Pacific air, slices of gable, white posts by the sea, an enveloping light like no other in American painting. Different artists see different Americans.
It was supposed to be a non-violent demonstration today.
The politically violent America of the late 60s and 70s, the America of the war, the protests, the furies unleashed at the 1968 Democratic Convention, radically changed the work of the highly respected abstract painter Philip Guston. And he changed the direction of American painting after 1970. As an abstract artist, Guston was known for his refined veils of paint. He'd begun as a figure painter in the 1930s, and many of his early works are images of social evil, like The Conspirators from 1932, a painting now lost, with its Ku Klux Klansman holding a whip. There had always been a storyteller inside the abstract artist, and now, in middle age, Guston let him out.
I think my father experienced a crisis in his development as an artist. He was widely quoted for saying, "I wanted to tell stories. I got sick and tired of all that purity," by which he meant, of course, the purity and perhaps minimalism by that point of abstract art. He said, "How can I go into my studio and adjust a red to a blue when all of this is happening in the world?" He felt that he had to respond to the world outside.
I began drawing a subject which I dealt with many years ago of hooded figures. They're obviously based on Ku Klux Klan figures, but I didn't mean to make a story about the Ku Klux Klan. I'm just using them as I suppose you'd call it a symbol.
Guston's Klansmen are both ludicrous and menacing. Red of neck and white of sheet, they ride around in jalopies up to no good, with blood on their robes. They are characters in the commedia dell'arte of an America deep in a social and political crisis. But Guston's Klansmen were obsolete characters. By 1970, the Ku Klux Klan was insignificant compared to real events. The Klan paintings were forced into existence by a political environment they didn't actually show. These klutzy images seemed a breach of etiquette, a treason to the artist's own serious past. But from there until his death, Guston's work only gathered intensity. Younger postmodernists pillaged his work for its grunge and irony, but Guston wasn't in any sense a postmodernist. He was a tragic painter with a deeply felt relation to history. This painting, The Street, is based on Paolo Uccello with boots instead of horses' hooves and trash can lids for shields. And there was nothing feigned about his despair. This painting, with its pathetic boots and the fires on the stony horizon, is called simply Pit. Out of the slang of comic strips, Philip Guston brought an immense sadness about human fate. Out of his pessimism about America, a lumpish beauty. He died in 1980, completely out of sync, as always, with the sunny fantasy of America that was coming.
I've always believed that this land was placed here between the two great oceans by some divine plan. It was placed here to be found by a special kind of people. People who had a special love for freedom and who had the courage to come to what in the beginning was the most undeveloped wilderness possible.
Ronald Reagan's immense appeal to Americans lay in offering them the rebirth of an America that had been lost in the conflicts and humiliations of the 60s and 70s. Victorious, leading the world, buoyant with the virtues of the mythic West.
For 200 years we've lived in the future, believing that tomorrow would be better than today and today would be better than yesterday. I still believe that. We can meet our destiny, and that destiny to build a land here that will be for all mankind a shining city on a hill.
This is not the Oval Office of the White House in Washington. It is in the Simi Valley, north of Los Angeles, in the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, a movie-set replica of the real stage on which the former actor worked in real life. Ronald Reagan, like most American presidents, including John Kennedy, had no particular interest in the visual arts, beyond film, of course. Yet his presidency had large indirect effects upon the American art world, more perhaps than anyone's since Franklin Roosevelt's. Why? Because in the course of quadrupling America's national deficit to about $1 trillion and filling the country with oceans of borrowed money, his economic policies created the art boom of the 1980s. This bubble had a blinding iridescence while it lasted, and every new investor was aware that if he bought new art, he'd come up smelling like Lorenzo de Medici's aftershave.
Thanks, Hillary.
The art dealers, of course, were high in hog heaven, floating on clouds of sanctimony.
Maria, I know most of the people who are collecting in the art world, whether they buy from me or not, and I probably will know something about you. And then I'll have to make a judgment. Will I take a chance on affiliating you to the gallery by letting you have one of these paintings? Now, that sounds terribly arrogant, but it's true. Anybody who gets one of these paintings is receiving a prize.
A booby prize sometimes, like a Julian Schnabel. His congested paintings with their broken plates and earnest, incompetent drawing made him a great favourite among those who yearned for the hot and the heavy. Schnabel was a monument of self-esteem who once compared himself to Giotto and Van Gogh. The patron saint of this inflation was Andy Warhol. It was Andy who demystified the art world by calling it by its real name, a business, a promotional system swept by tides of fashion and snobbery. After his death in 1987, there was a giant auction of his things. Andy must have been smiling down from heaven when his flea market cookie jars came on the block and the relic hunters went crazy.
Ready, teen? $19,000, $20,000 on the right. At 20,000, 21,000. At 21,000, fair warning. $21,000.
If cheap cookie jars could become treasures in the 1980s, then how much more the work of the very egregious Jeff Koons, a former bond trader whose ambitions took him right through kitsch and out the other side into a vulgarity so syrupy, gross and numbing that collectors felt challenged by it. Sometimes his work was at least memorable, like this inflatable toy rabbit cast in stainless steel and turned into a parody of Brancusi's Burns. He didn't make his own stuff, of course. No doubt Koons couldn't carve his name on a tree. He had European souvenir factories do that, creating delicious porcelain treasures to his design, like Michael Jackson with bubbles. And Leonardo's St. John. This little piggy went to market in a big way, for Koons sees himself as a spiritual artist. Accusing him of hype is like rebuking a fish for being wet.
Hi, Jet. A kitten in a giant sock. Tell me about it.
This is one of my newer works that I'm creating. And I think that it's a piece that's working in kind of a very classical tradition of a crucifixion. And this is very open. It's more fun-loving in a way, and also deal with a spiritual theme.
Well, I don't see much spirituality there yet. I see a very large and playful pussycat in a sock, but how are you going to inject spirituality into this image?
I'm going to give the cat a little more Bambi-like eyelashes.
Very spiritual Bambi, yeah.
And I think that the flowers are really quite beautiful. They're very, very Baroque. I try to make works, that are very generous. I try to be as generous as I can be with myself.
What do you mean by generous? I mean, how is this more generous, say, than some other kind of sculpture? What's generous about it?
Well, I think that it's communicating love, it's communicating happiness, and it doesn't alienate anyone. I think that a young child could come in here, a 5-year-old child could look and find some pleasure and some enjoyment, and I hope that it's something positive for humankind.
Have you ever actually done any carving or modeling?
No. When I was a child, I did some modeling.
What with plasticine or modeling?
But now we're working here in my New York studio, and I have a staff of artists that I work with, which are really quite phenomenal.
So you think the stuff up, but you don't make it?
That's correct. I have to oversee everything here, and I have to make every decision. Otherwise, I'd have no relation to it at all.
The 1980s may have been a low, dishonest time for much American art, but they were still serious artists around. And some of them continued to draw inspiration from the natural rather than the media environment. Susan Rothenberg lives on a horse ranch outside Santa Fe in New Mexico. Dotted around are the remains of ancient Indian pueblos.
What's affecting me here very much is the color of this earth, the color of the fragments, which tend to be red, black, and white. And I've got a lot more red in my palette than I ever had. And what's new here, and I don't know where I learned to believe this, but that yellow is the color of death. And a lot of yellow is coming into my work.
Rothenberg came of age as an artist in the early 70s when minimalism still reigned. But she wanted a recognizable image and found it, rather unexpectedly, in horses.
In the 70s, when you found yourself thinking about painting a horse, did the idea take you by surprise?
Yes, it did, because I had an idea that I wanted to make a painting with figure and ground the same color, but I didn't know what image I would be using, and it couldn't be a human figure because people just didn't do such a thing in the early 70s, so I needed something big and powerful to hook into. It was a vehicle for emotion and paint.
In later paintings, the image of the horse is decomposed. It fragments. Then it gives way to abrupt signs for human figures and faces, bluntly pathetic, that result not so much of an idea as of a lump in the mind. They're signs for stress. Rothenberg tries to strip feeling, anxiety most of all, down to basic signs, and yet her images have a dignity that comes from distance and restraint. They're not just emotional splurge.
I was thinking about how Americans are known to want something new, and whether it's really true that we do, and whether my work is American. And I think in that I don't want to ever continue painting the way I did yesterday is American. I'm a thrill seeker, like Americans. But I tell you that in a period like now when painting isn't particularly active or exciting, it enervates me. It makes me feel bad too. I'm enough a part of my culture to want painting to be hot, to feel competitive in it, active in it, and to know that there's an appetite for it.
The suburban landscape of America stretches from Long Island to Anaheim. It's familiar territory from TV, sitcoms, and the movies. And in the 1980s, its inhabitants got their very own painter laureate, Eric Fischl.
In the beginning, I think my paintings were generated from a lot of anger, focused on the place that I came from, and I did come from the suburbs. In the environment in which I grew up in, there was not an ability to acknowledge what the reality was. Everything was tried to be held into a set of acceptable images, and they didn't often conform to what really was taking place.
Poorly trained at art school, Fischl is a clumsy, uneven draftsman of the figure, but he finds images that seem to trail a whole narrative behind them. Memories of Edward Hopper's paintings of the 1930s underlie his work. He paints the middle classes not as lonely, but as positively deranged. His suburbs smell of hot vinyl, sperm, and barbecue fluid. Eric Fischl opens a peephole into a life that might just have been yours. The big source of America's cultural anxiety today is identity. You can't live here without getting a gutful of identity. If not your own, then other people's. America is in the business of inventing identities based on narrow conceptions of gender, race, and the rest. These have made for narrow, preachy, single-issue art in which victim credentials count for more than aesthetic achievement. You get irritable agitprop, like this poster painting by Barbara Kruger telling us that it's a small world, but not if you have to clean it. Or this neon piece rebuking the American government for not doing enough in AIDS research. All true, no doubt, but the fact that an artwork's about injustice no more gives it aesthetic status than the fact that it's about mermaids. This piece by Janine Anthony is about bulimia. She took a big lump of chocolate and gnawed at it like a beaver going at a tree. But so what? But the mother of American identity art is a French-born sculptor who came to the United States 50 years ago, Louise Bourgeois.
This is very empty here, and the emptiness here and the cleanliness is indispensable. It is the very opposite. It is the very opposite of the cluttered labyrinth that we have inside.
Bourgeois' sculpture is meant to make you uncomfortable. The works summon up experiences that come from deep within the body, the female body, exposure, protection, weak aggression. The body as totem, as cave, as lair. The source of Bourgeois' pain doesn't show, but it propels the images.
Do you find that the act of making sculpture is a way of mastering the fears which...
Yes, absolutely. The act of making a sculpture is to put order in discord, right? At any kind of level. Otherwise, the anxiety comes in. Chaos, the fear of chaos, that's it.
The anxiety has everything to do with the body, doesn't it? With the possibility that the body will be dismembered, that it will be left alone.
Absolutely, destroyed. Yes. You see, the human condition for me is the relation of man to woman. And I was brought up in a family where the violence was present. And one of the things that my mother did, when the anxiety of my father crept up, she knew that before every meal, so she put a little pile of sauces next to his plate. When anxiety came, you see, and that noise, for him it cleared the air. It cleared the air. He felt better, right?
How did you feel?
I felt relieved because I stopped being afraid of what was going to happen. It had happened, right? Right.
From the cluttered maze of her studio, Bourgeois puts together the contents of what she calls her cells. Small rooms full of bottles, bodies, writings, stuffed dresses, environments filled with the traces of memory.
Living in America has clearly given your work opportunities that it might not have had in Europe.
I grant you, yeah, that's true. That's true.
What were those opportunities, and do they make you feel like an American rather than a European artist?
That in this country, anything goes. It is a great freedom. You can be as crazy as you want, and this is freedom. And in Europe, you are absolutely the prisoner of an establishment. So I'm very grateful for that. Nobody is going to tell me what to do in the first place, and nobody is going to tell me that it is good, bad, or indifferent.
And indeed the artist, especially the well-known artist, is free in America. He or she gets total latitude, often at great expense. This pavilion in a Los Angeles garden is a piece by James Turrell. It contains nothing but air, and from it you watch the sky. The work is called Second Meeting. As the sun sets, the contrast between the artificial light inside and the natural light outside makes that perfectly cut square become almost palpable.
I put you in a situation where you feel the physicality of light. This is an art that people try to touch, and yet there's nothing to touch. There is, first of all, no object, and there is no image, nor any place of focus. What are you then looking at? Well, I'm hoping that you then have the self-reflexive act of looking at your looking, so that you're actually seeing yourself see to some degree, and it does reveal something about your seeing, as opposed to being a journal of my seeing.
Turrell's art doesn't happen in front of your eyes, it happens behind them. Since the late 70s, Turrell's big project has been to turn a whole crater on the edge of the Painted Desert in Arizona into a work of art.
How did you come upon the Roden crater?
Through flight. A lot of how I come about this look at space and light inhabiting it is through flight. I flew the western states to look at a site where I could make a series of spaces that literally did engage the visual world above as you engage it in flight. Generally, I would fly for about 3 or 4 days and sleep under the plane at night. Basically, that was the life I had for about 7 months. I literally was looking for this bowl-shaped space held up in the air.
But then at the end of the 7 months you came on the Roden crater, and that was it?
That was it. I liked the color of it. I liked its position. Of course, I wanted to find one that was privately owned and for sale. And in the end, I had to buy a ranch to get a volcano.
Inside this great volcanic hill, Tyrrell plans tunnels, viewing chambers, and pools acting as lenses of water that will enable the visitor to experience the light of the sun, the moon, and the stars in isolated, concentrated ways. It's an American vision on an epic scale, not just painting the Western landscape, but subtly transforming it.
I've selected the crater, first of all, an environment that is exposed geology. And in this stage set of geologic time, I then wish to make spaces that engage celestial events in light, so as to play the music of the spheres in light, simply.
Very simple, yes.
Well, I must say, in looking at the plans, it doesn't seem so simple, and perhaps it isn't in that respect. But when you greet my work with your perception, it is quite a simple act.
Tell me something, when you got here, was the crater rim like this, or did you have to do a lot of bulldozing?
Oh no, it's been shaped. So it still looks like a volcano, but it's now trued up a bit, as I'd say.
What, you had caterpillars up there slicing off the top, huh?
Yes. Basically, the whole shaping was done so as to shape the sky. It took about 220,000 cubic yards of moving before that began to happen. Okay, one of the things I'd like to have you do is to lie down and see the horizon from that position.
Where do we do it?
Right here is a good place, right here. I'll shade you.
All right. Just right back, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
Framed in the arc of the rim, you see the sky as a huge blue dome, all-embracing, transparent, but somehow solid, an eyeball.
This is almost where we came in, the vision of America as a sublime wilderness far in the west. But the God-given blank slate that Europeans thought they had has been written over again and again for the last 400 years. So much so that we've now got postmodernists saying that nature is just another cultural construct and that art doesn't need it. Well, you can tell that one to the coyotes. None of us is outside of nature. We are all a part of nature. A bad, ungrateful part sometimes, but part of it all the same. And an art that doesn't take that into account isn't going to satisfy us or delight us for very long. The world is so various, so interconnected, that it still remains the best ground of invention. That inventiveness, that sense of possibility, is flagging badly in America now, as it is in the rest of the world. American art seems to be losing the two qualities that once made it special, its plain empirical speech and its spiritual hopes. All cultures decay, and the culture of American modernism, once so vital, so open, and so confident, may be no exception to that as we move towards the year 2000. I think of the words of W.B. Yeats: the best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. But then again, in the equally durable words of Scarlett O'Hara, tomorrow is another day.
televisions at PBS Online and further explore the American experience through art at the address on your screen.